Broadcasting furry truth from a tiny comics box in Seagirt. This is Furry Frequencies, the best furries on the highest frequency. I'm Lifty, and joining me on the podcast this evening is Silox.
Hey, how's it going?
And on tonight's podcast, we are going to be talking about coronavirus myths and facts. And to join us and to talk about coronavirus, we have a very special guest. His name is Kaz and Quincy. Go ahead and say hello.
Hey, it's Kaz and Quincy, but you can just call me Kaz.
Okay, wonderful.
Hello, Kaz.
Yes. So welcome back, everybody, from New Year's break. Hopefully you had a very nice New Year's. We, of course, had a very nice New Year's. We've revamped the show. We're going to have a new show for you. And we are doing this all for you, the listener, so that we provide a better show for you. We are still working hard at providing a better show for you and provide a better listening experience. And this starts with our very first episode of 2021. And of course, we're talking about a very serious topic, coronavirus. And it's something that I don't think furries quite understand all that well, despite all the information that we have on our fingertips. It's not something that I'm still hearing myths being perpetuated. I'm still hearing falsehoods perpetuated about it. It's something that's doesn't seem like it's understood all that well by the furry community. And so we're going to try to clear that up with somebody who knows a lot about coronavirus. And let's just start by having Kaz introduce yourself.
Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Thanks, Alex. Hello.
Hello.
Silox, are you having issues?
Doesn't he always?
2021.
No
can
one.
edit.
And this is why we
here's the best. This is why this is
gosh.
pre-recorded, because we can edit all this out. And I don't know why everybody went silent on your end, Silox, but we're pretty chatty on my end. Silox over there playing Silent Night. Space bar. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's the
I'm sorry.
space bar. God.
So you all just like you just cut out, and I couldn't hear you for like I don't know 90 seconds. That was weird. Yeah.
It's gotta be an internet.
Sounds like a
internet
you
issue.
problem.
Yeah. But anyway, Kaz and Quincy, you have a very important role to play in the fight against coronavirus. And can you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are and how long you've been in the furry community?
Sure. So I guess starting off, like, my name is Kaz. Made that name, like, I don't know, over 10 years ago at this point, Call of Duty. Long story there, it doesn't matter. I got in the furry fandom back in 2014, and got heavily involved in like early 2015. Went to my first convention in 2015. I was like, immediately I knew I needed to get a fursuit, because that just seems like the thing to do. Let's see, I got my first fursuit in like 2017, which was also my first year I went to AC. That's when I started doing, like, just going around up and down the East Coast to conventions. Then I got my second fursuit in 2017. It was like double suit year. And since then, I've just gone to a bunch of conventions like AC, MFF, FWA, furthermore, Philadelphia, and yeah. And I guess on the medical side of things, I've been a nurse since 2016. I used to work at a restaurant, and of course that just goes so well into becoming a nurse. So I was a server, and then suddenly I'm working in an ICU as a nurse later that year. So yeah, so I've been a nurse for about 4.5 years now in the ICU, and all the things changed into early 2020.
Yes, it did. And
Yeah. A lot of things.
yeah. And first of all, bless you for your work in the ICU. It's very important. And bless everybody who's a first responder to this virus. You're all doing a spectacular job. You're all doing a very important job, and really, you're a literal lifesaver. You're a literal lifesaver.
Yeah, so
So
there's some days
yeah.
where I'm like, some days feel better than others. Some days you feel like a lifesaver. Sometimes you feel like some things are just kind of like nothing I do is even doing like helping. But
Oh,
that's just kind of the nature of how things go
oh,
when you have people in ICU, and some people you're not going to save everyone. So,
yeah.
but some people you do, and those are your success stories that you hold on to.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. So let's start off this conversation by talking about coronavirus testing, because this is something that I've noticed. A lot of people get the whole thing about testing twisted. They have a misconception about how healthy they are when they receive their negative test. And one of the myths of coronavirus testing is, I just got my coronavirus test results and it says I'm negative. That means I don't have it right now.
Sure, sure. So a lot of things go into having like just a basic, like an accurate test.
Mhm.
Most testings have, or at least early on. I know there's a few different varieties of testing, but the most accurate, the one that we use is like kind of the test that goes straight in like the back of your nose,
Hmm.
and that's a very uncomfortable test, but that's like bread and butter. Like that's probably one of the best ones you can use. Um, but yeah, a negative test uh, isn't necessarily like I'm good to go. I'm great. This is like I'm negative, perfect, and everything. It still depends on how well the test was performed. So if you don't get all the way back, or if people kind of resist a little bit, you may not get like the perfect positioning for your swab,
Mhm.
and that's just probably like the easiest thing of it, like the thing that negates a good test. So
Okay.
Isn't
Mhm.
isn't it also possible that they're not producing virus yet, and therefore it can't be detected?
yeah, yeah. So one of the issues with COVID, as compared to the flu, I believe the flu, like if you get, I actually don't know the onset of symptoms after your exposure to the flu, but it's usually pretty rapid within just a couple days. Unfortunately, with COVID, it's a lot longer, so you can have symptoms up to like 5 days to like 2 weeks after exposure, and that's the very difficult part. So, just for example, like we've had a few nurses and a few staff at work get exposures, and the hospital will be like, "Oh, you got to get a test like the next day," and then they'll be negative, but we know that symptoms can onset a week to 2 weeks later. Um, so they'll have like a repeat test done, usually at that like 1 week mark. And usually, if they're negative and they've passed like the 10-day quarantine, then they come back to work.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Now, when it comes to a negative test, there are a lot of people that still travel um, despite coronavirus restrictions, and they use the test. They use the test as something that they hold on to, saying, "Yes, I tested before I went, and here's my test. It shows that I'm negative." Now, what are the pitfalls of believing in or believing in a negative test like this?
So I mean, if you're thinking that you're safe, like completely safe and ready to go wherever you like because you're negative,
Hmm.
um, it's not quite like the whole story. Like, cool, if you're negative, that's great. Uh, your chance of like spreading it are probably low, and hopefully you're not symptomatic. Just
Hmm.
be aware, like if your exposure was just within the past few days, you may not be symptomatic for another few days. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Hmm.
Um, and what's the next part of your question?
Um, well, it has to do with having the thought of holding a negative test, or thinking that, or having the false sense of security that a negative test provides, where
Mhm.
people are thinking that just because I tested negative doesn't mean, or just because I tested negative means, oh, I don't have it, and therefore I can go across the country and see friends and then come back and I still won't have it and I'll be fine, whatever. And there's a definite pitfall to following into that kind of logic.
Of course.
Yeah.
So even if you're just like going across the country or going to a different friend's house, who's to say that they got tested? And maybe you had an event where like, oh, okay, everyone here got tested, but then you fall into that little like possibility of maybe the test wasn't performed like appropriately or correctly,
Mhm.
or they all got tested and like someone could have been exposed like 2 days prior to the test and they're not even symptomatic yet. They're not even like shedding the virus at all yet. So um I mean, if you
Mhm.
want to go across the country, you're still at risk of catching it. You're still at risk from
Mhm.
being exposed. So just that travel increase is just increasing your risk. The more people that you're coming in contact with, just increasing your chance of exposure.
So I did want to ask you, Cass. You
Yeah.
obviously work at a hospital. Have you ever seen anything like this before in your professional career? Has the
Uh
hospital ever been this packed and
oh
you
god,
know?
yeah, that's the best question right there. I've only been a nurse for 4.5 years. So I also try and like ask a lot of like the older nurses, have they seen anything like this? Their answer is no. And have I seen anything like this? The answer is no. This past like ever since Thanksgiving, it's been crazy, dude. Like we just run like a little 12-bed ICU.
Hmm.
And I think on an average year, on an average month, what it average everything, um, we'll maybe have 4, 5, 6 patients in ICU at a time, and things will be all right. Staffing's great. Well, not always. It's a hospital. Staffing is never always great. But like staffing will be all right most of the time. But like after Thanksgiving, things just went ham, as the children used to say. But no, we've consistently had like at least 10 to 12 patients in our ICU at any given time. So we've been pretty much maxed out. And it's not like we'll just have 10 or 12 patients and assignments are fine and patient care is standard. Like these are all patients who are on isolation and they are all like so sick. Um, like one of the biggest difficulties having COVID patients is because they're on isolation, you can't get in the room
Hmm.
right away. And some of these people, a lot of them are older, so some of them may be confused. Some may have like baseline dementia, or they're just
Yeah.
weak. So you're using a lot of like external oxygen devices, like a heated high flow oxygen nasal cannula, or like a pressurized mask called like a BiPAP mask.
Hmm.
Um, and a lot of times, if patients may go around or if they're confused, they might be trying to take these devices off. And with COVID, like people, if they're in ICU already, they're already so like sensitive to need like to oxygen. So if they're off oxygen for less than a minute, their saturation of oxygen can drop so fast. Um,
Oof.
yeah, yeah. This isn't just like a normal patient in the hospital with like a COPD exacerbation or just a pneumonia where if they're off oxygen, typically you got a few minutes, you got some time to like notice it and get it back in the room.
Mm.
But these patients, if they are off oxygen for just a couple minutes, that can be disastrous, right?
Wow. Now, have there been any research into why coronavirus affects people so severely, or affects certain parts or some certain members of the community so hard, and yet others it affects very mildly?
I
Because
think a lot.
that to me seems like the most bizarre thing, is that it is said that those with comorbidities definitely have are more at risk of having a very, very adverse reaction to coronavirus, but a lot of other people who don't have comorbidities may actually not have such um, a harsh effect.
Sure, sure. So, um, there's a lot of like ongoing studies to determine
Mhm.
like which patients you predict will get sick. Um, I know a lot of people I've heard like different blood types might be like more immune or more resistant to COVID. I haven't seen anything. I haven't gone like on a big search to see if there's any like data behind it. I know people are saying like O positive people are like, or just people with O blood types are more resistant. I don't know.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah. So, but no,
That's
there's still,
interesting.
yeah. Don't quote me on that. I don't know how much
Mhm.
like science there's behind that, but there's a lot of different like comorbidities that um, may not matter as much, and there's a lot of like comorbidities or past medical histories that do have like a large impact. And I think having, and even if people don't have any like chronic diseases, um, it's still that's one of the big things that kind of confuses people and causes a lot of like COVID hesitancy or
Mhm.
skepticism, or like you may have a completely healthy person and get very sick, or people like my grandma who's had like lung cancer and pneumonia and um, upper GI bleeds who get COVID and she's fine. She had a fever for a day or two. She's like 88 in a nursing home, just living life. No big
Wow.
deal. And then we'll have like people in ICU who are like 30s or 40 years old and not much history and they'll be sick as hell. So that
Yeah.
it does that seeing that like fluctuation or like that like difference between patients makes people
Yeah.
kind of skeptical about some things. So
And you
Mhm.
know what I think is interesting is the way it's been framed so much. And I don't want to say just not solely in the media itself, but on social media and from word of mouth is, oh, this is just a disease that, excuse me, a virus that typically ravages those who are elderly or those who may be in high risk pools. You know, those who might have a pre-existing condition, like let's say diabetes, you know, heart failure, or they're old. But then we see what we saw during the summer and the fall when the children were going back um, to school and to college. You know, we saw a rise in that group catching coronavirus, and in some cases, they're dying from it, or um, they're recovering but have long term health problems. And so I think people need to wrap their heads around that. Yes, while it does tend to affect the elderly and those who have pre-existing conditions, it also affects those who are in our generation of our age, those who are young. And if they are surviving, they come out of it with long-term health issues, and it's not pretty. And I don't think that's talked about enough.
yeah, you said you had a lot of good points in there, and like I could go on and on about like so many of them. I think one of the things I do want to highlight is that COVID like affects everyone, whether directly or indirectly. Where like people like our age, most of us will do just fine for COVID. Some of us will lose our taste or smell for a few days. Maybe we'll have a fever and feel lousy for a couple days or one day, and some of us may not feel anything. Um, and then even just very few of us, people in our age group, 20s, 30s, maybe a small fraction will be like end up in an ICU. But the issue is that there are a lot of people who are elderly. There are a lot of people who have chronic diseases. Like our because of like our advances in like medical care, and just our knowledge about the human body, people live longer and they live sicker with chronic diseases. People are like into their 80s now, like chronic renal failure, who are like on dialysis, and people live into their 80s and 90s with congestive heart failure. So these are the people who are like if they catch COVID, they're like a higher risk. So what we're seeing now, like y'all may have heard about the hospital system in LA currently, that
Yeah.
they're like reaching their breaking point. They're like all their hospitals are completely full. They're running out of PPE. They're low on resources. Staff is overwhelmed, uh, and staff at that point. Why would you? If I found my nurse in LA and like I come into ICU and like all my patients are so sick, we're low on PPE, everything is chaos. Like, why would I want to work there? Like, staff are quitting. It's the kind of nature of it. Like, I don't want to work on like a battlefield every day. So, when hospitals are full, that hurts everyone. That delays people who don't have COVID, that delays people like who need catheterizations for like heart attacks, or if you have a stroke, that delays your care. If you need like a thrombectomy or something, people who need surgeries, that delays that because the hospital's overwhelmed. All the nurses are being utilized. They're using OR nurses on the floors. So
Oh,
yeah. So people like me, like let's say I'm 27. Let's just say my appendix ruptures. That can happen to anyone. It's kind of scary to say, but people get appendicitis, and sometimes you need surgery for that. It's usually pretty quick and easy and rather benign if you catch it and get to the ER. It's not usually a big deal, but like if that gets delayed because the hospital's overwhelmed, well, now because you didn't take COVID seriously, well, now your appendectomy gets delayed, and you might get a little bit sicker, and it's just putting everyone at risk.
wow,
And I
that
think
sucks.
there have been reports of people like of actual patients
Yep.
having like because they'll come to the hospital with a heart attack, and they'll be like asymptomatic, but they'll be tested positive for COVID. Some hospitals have like refused transfer, like, oh, we can't take that transfer because they're COVID positive, and maybe they will, or maybe they'll look for a different hospital. But in the meantime, while they're looking for someone else to go take that patient to, the patient, like time is tissue, the person is losing like muscle mass in the heart, and they're just kind of sitting there. And it's not every hospital has like a cath lab to treat a heart attack. So
Oh,
yeah,
oh boy.
these are all the downstream effects of hospitals being full.
Yeah. I don't envy your job at all. It's got to be like my nerve wracking just going into work every day.
Yeah, this past month has been rough.
Yeah.
I know I mentioned earlier that my ICU has like 12 beds. I was at work yesterday. 9 of those patients were COVID positive and were like symptomatic COVID positive. They're there for COVID. So yeah, it's been a little rough.
Oh. Now,
Yeah, it has. But
Keep up the good work. We believe in
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Frontline workers and those of you who are putting your lives on the line to save others are really important. And out of all this, I think you all are the true heroes. Where others have failed to step up, you all who are putting in those hours day in and day out and putting yourself at exposure to save others. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah.
And it's really good to see.
No, thank you. Yeah,
Not a
it's
problem.
I guess. Wow. I mean, we're all in it to help each other. So
Yeah.
even people who aren't on front lines, people who are trying to still live their daily life and just keeping themselves safe and keeping others safe, they're also heroes too. I have a place to go back to, like people who work in, I guess, factories and electrical stations, and I don't know. These are the people that keeping my power on, keeping the water flowing too. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: there's some amongst the people I talk to, there's some misunderstanding about what happened about the coronavirus in terms of if you can catch it again. Some people will say you can catch it once, and once you catch it, you're fine. You can't catch it again. Others have told me, well, you can catch it again, and they know people who have caught it twice, though I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know the answer to that. Do you know how that works? Can you catch coronavirus a second, third, fourth time, however many times, or is it just a one and done kind of deal?
So it's still a bit early to give a absolute definitive answer, it seems, but there have definitely been reports of people being positive twice.
Mhm.
We Funny you asked that, and this is good timing, I guess, on this podcast. We had a recent patient come back in who was positive over the summer, and then later on had a negative test, and then was fine living at home. Came back again, and just in early January, had another positive test of COVID. So we've seen that. Some people aren't, like you said, some people aren't sure if you can get it a second time. It seems like you can. I don't want to give you an absolute answer, but I mean, I guess I'm seeing it right now. So, I know there's talk of a new, like a more recently, like a different strain of COVID. It's like more spreads easier. I can't think of the word. More contagious,
Virulent?
or but yeah, I don't know if because that was a different strain, maybe this guy got that one. I'm not sure. We weren't able to the sample from the summer and the sample
Mhm.
from now. We can't really compare those two. The one from summer is already gone. So, but I'll give a tentative yes. You can get it again.
Okay. And just
So,
another. Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, and just another one. Those who say, well, it's the survival rate of COVID-19 is 99%. What's the big deal with that? Why should we be worried if it's 99%? What do you say to those people who may be of that opinion?
I mean, I would say just look at LA right now. Look at New York back in March and April of last year. I mean, look at my hospital now, where hospitals across the system are overwhelmed across the country and across the world, really. Are but the United States is like number one in COVID. Got to be number one. Um, but I don't know. All the hospitals across the country are overwhelmed. I, sure, people don't die, uh, and it's the people don't die as much as they do with, like, let's say something like Ebola, which has a very high mortality rate. But even if COVID has just a 1% mortality rate, that's still I mean, it's still something that is very, like, we can still prevent it pretty easily, relatively easily. And it's still
And
serious because even people who don't die, they may still end up being in an ICU for 2, 3, 4 weeks. They'll be very deconditioned afterwards, so they'll need lots of physical therapy. These people will need pulmonary rehab afterwards. So people can be basically like out of commission for a few months at a time.
if I may
So
interject,
yeah,
there's also still so much that we don't know about the virus,
correct.
and there could be some very severe long-term effects. There's been reports of neurological problems, blood problems. So, like this, it might not kill you right away, but down the road, who knows?
Yeah. So I have a coworker who I guess I can't really say coworker anymore because they got COVID, like they got a severe case of it, and they're now out of a job, so that's great. Um, but he got it back in May, landed in our ICU, and this is a coworker. We all know him, so we're all rooting for this guy. Um, wasn't intubated. He didn't. He never got. He was very close to it. We almost had to. He spent a few days maxed out on external oxygen, but we got him back. Um, got him recovered, got him back home, but he still uses oxygen to this day. He still needs oxygen. He's still very weak. Still goes like gets physical therapy at home, and he's out of a job now. So
That's awful.
yeah,
And how long has it
Very
been
awful.
since he was diagnosed?
he was discharged at the end of May.
Oh,
Yep.
that's terrible. That's
Hmm.
terrible. So I want to segue into talking about the coronavirus vaccine because it was released uh, earlier in the later end or the tail end of 2020
Hmm.
and released to first line response or frontline workers and senior citizens. And let's talk about the theories that we have heard about the vaccine and some of the most outlandish misinformation we have heard about the vaccine
And
because
there's a lot.
there is quite a lot. There's quite a
Unfortunately.
lot that a lot of people, including several in the furry community,
Oh
believe
boy.
about the vaccine, and it's there's just no evidence to. I mean, all of this is brought up with no evidence, and yet it still stays in the public consciousness.
Well, that's because they're
So,
covering it up. I'm just kidding.
so for the record, we have two vaccines currently being distributed, one from Moderna and one from Pfizer. I think both of them, if I understand it correctly, both of them require 2 dosages spread apart by about 1 week, 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, so the Pfizer vaccine, that one came out like a week or 2 before the Moderna one. That requires a second vaccine 3 weeks afterwards. The Moderna vaccine requires the second dose 4 weeks afterwards.
Okay. And I've heard some very wild conspiracy theories. Basically, anything from, well, it's the mark of the beast. The Bible says this is evil because it's the mark of the beast. All the way to Bill Gates has inserted microchips into all of the vaccines so that when you get the vaccine, you'll be microchipped, and other nonsense. And of course, none of this is brought forth with even a shred of evidence. It's like a conspiracy theory leading to another conspiracy theory, leading to another conspiracy theory. None of it has any evidence or any basis in reality. And what do you have to say about all this?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that. I mean, if your religion says that the COVID vaccine made in 2020, and like there's a book that wrote this for this specific year that said this would be the mark of the beast, and like I guess I can't disagree with you. But I mean, if there's any proof, I'll look at it. I mean, until then, I'm gonna follow the science and
Yeah.
follow what all of my doctors are saying. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
But
if this vaccine is super harmful as people say it is, then get ready for, I guess, the country to fall, because every healthcare worker, or at least most healthcare workers, just got it. So, but
well,
no, I mean, there's like full on like trials that were done with tens of thousands of people done, with very minimal side effects. As far as I'm aware, nothing long term.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
we just there's no data says that this is some big evil conspiracy yet.
Yeah. Well, Silence and I, we actually looked into a lot of the information and data regarding the coronavirus vaccine, and it's actually fascinating what we've learned leading up to this show. For one, we did learn that there was one possible vaccine that was actually rejected. One vaccine trial that was rejected, and it was, I think, from the University of Queensland. They found that the test subjects that had this coronavirus vaccine injected had also tested positive for HIV.
Oh, really?
And yes, so they found that the problem was they don't have HIV. None of these patients actually have HIV, the virus in their body. However, the HIV tests are actually detecting a protein that becomes uncoupled when the COVID vaccine is injected into the body, and this is what triggers the positive test in the HIV. So the vaccine decoupled when it was injected. It had a tiny little protein clamp to keep it together, and that is what was actually triggering the positive test in the HIV test when they were getting tested for HIV. So they found that this was no good. Nobody wants to go to their doctor and get tested for HIV thinking they're fine and dandy, and then the test results come back and they say, oh, you have HIV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was obviously rejected. But other than that, you have trials going all over the world. There are labs all over the world that are producing their own coronavirus vaccine, and it's actually interesting to learn that Business Insider, they actually did I think it was Business Insider, they did facts on the coronavirus and how it's going all over the world, and it's amazing to find the pace at which we're going compared to the pace of like Europe and Britain and Asia. It's it's remarkable because you wouldn't think of this, but actually we're at a good pace, believe it or not. We're at, in places like Europe, they're actually struggling with the logistics of actually or distributing the vaccine, because Germany has like 260,000 people vaccinated, but France next door has a little over 500 people.
Oh, geez.
It's like, how is this happening? And then of course in Britain, right across the water from France, you have close to 1 million people, close to 1 million. And of course, none of those numbers match what we're doing here in the United States. We're close to what, 9-10 million vaccinated.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
I think at the turn of the year we're at 4 million, which is actually
Okay, all right.
under what experts, I guess, quote unquote, experts were saying that they wanted it at. So I think their goal was
yeah,
like 20 million by the end of the year. But
yeah. The goal was 20 million by the end of the year. We barely managed to get 4 million
right,
by New Year's.
Yeah.
So we're actually underperforming, and there's reasons for that that I won't get into.
Actually, it was on Bloomberg. Bloomberg has a COVID vaccine tracker, and we'll tweet about this later.
But
Um,
what
yeah.
I wanted to bring up was, and this goes back to the whole issue with conspiracies and
Mhm.
skepticism. The
Yeah.
rate at which this vaccine was produced, which by all metrics is stunning. Vaccines, to my knowledge, generally don't come out in a year or less than a year. It usually takes what, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. If
Mhm.
anyone knows how long it is, please tell me. But the rate at which this came out is astounding, and it's amazing to see that happen.
Yeah.
However, the side effect of that is people then look at it and say, well, this was rushed because of an election, or this was rushed so they can make tons of money, and I don't want to take this. And unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of people adopt that mindset because they don't understand that this wasn't rushed out. To my knowledge, they had already been tinkering around with coronavirus in general, not COVID-19, but a coronavirus in general. So they had all the information there. They just had to, tinker it to get it to what's the term? Sync up
To
with
mark.
COVID-19. Yes, let's say that sync up with COVID-19.
there
So
you go.
they
Yeah,
had to
so
engineer it for COVID-19.
yes, so the
Yeah.
research for coronavirus was already there, but they engineered it for COVID-19 specifically.
Mhm.
It's not as if they just rushed this into production just like that because they were told to by our president or because someone paid them $1 billion. No, no. The the information was already there. They just engineered it to fit COVID-19.
Yeah, I
But
believe there's
again,
already a lot of progress made by even March on the vaccine.
oh yeah,
So, and I
yeah,
mean, it is a coronavirus. So there's, um, this is not my field of expertise. So, but do believe they're definitely able to like pull data from SARS-CoV-1, which is COVID-19 causes SARS-CoV-2. I
Mhm.
believe they're also able to pull from like MERS-CoV. I think was that what's called?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's respiratory.
MERS was also a coronavirus. Yes.
Right, right. So they're able to pull data from that. And I know like even at the end of 2019, there's still a lot of like data coming out on this virus. So
Yeah.
yeah. Incredibly lucky that it was one, not a very fatal virus like MERS is, and two, that it is something that we have seen before in terms of it being a coronavirus. If it was something totally foreign, I don't think we would have a vaccine out at all. We would be struggling to, God, I don't know. So we're kind of lucky in that regard.
right,
Um,
right,
but
Yeah.
unfortunately, we still do face the challenge of dispelling rumors and easing people's fears about the vaccine, so they understand that no, the government isn't trying to microchip you or run experiments or anything like that.
Mhm.
Um,
I think
so
that would
it'll
be pretty expensive to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
Super.
looking at how do you manufacture microchips that small? I mean, I've
Ask
heard of
Bill Gates.
nanotechnology. I mean, I've heard of
Yeah.
nanotechnology, but this on such a global scale is just mind-boggling. This is like the height of this is peak paranoia right here.
It is. It is. And again, social media likes to perpetuate these myths, and unfortunately, government officials have not done a good job at explaining, at least in my opinion, what coronavirus is, what causes it, what doesn't cause it, how to treat it. So a lot of these myths and conspiracies have been allowed to run amok all
Mhm.
throughout 2020 and 2021, and people are set in their ways. And unfortunately, there's no changing some of those people. So
Yeah, unfortunately, we're at a time where the political divide is probably maybe like the greatest ever in the U.S. history, where people are can be or people are so far left at the moment for U.S. standards, and people can be so far right
Mhm.
for our standards. Like people, and this has been a divisive presidency, and people just will stick to their guns on what they think is right, which may be so far from reality, which may be reality. But I mean, people don't want to be wrong, and they'll think what they want to think.
Yeah.
So
I know that's right. I hate being
unfortunately,
wrong.
yeah, nobody wants to be wrong.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this virus came at a time where the country is at its most divided. So people
Mhm.
are like, "No, it's a political issue." It was like, "No, like this is a virus. This is not political."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, viruses
So
aren't cool. So, I just
I
hope that we're able to get this vaccine out over I don't know how long it's gonna take, but I just hope we're able to get it out, over these next 11 months or something quicker, but we shall see.
I want to also move into coronavirus and the furry community because since we last spoke about the coronavirus here on this podcast, the world has changed, our country has changed, and our community has changed. The furry community has changed. We have seen conventions just cancel by the handful throughout the year, and they're still canceling right now. I know we started the year with an announcement from Furthermore saying that they will move to a virtual convention for 2021. And again, I don't, I don't blame them. I think that their decision was fair and just, and was adjusted for the conditions. And not only that, right after that, we had the opening of registration for Anthrocon. So the furry community is feeling like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But is this should we, how much some people still feel skeptical. Some people feel skeptical, some people feel hopeful, some people feel like, yeah, this will all be over by the time the summer rolls in.
Yeah, there was a lot of people in that comment section on Twitter when AC announced their opening registration who were very skeptical.
Yeah.
And some didn't feel safe. Some were like, "Well, are you going to mandate masks? Is there going to be social distancing policies in place?" Others were relieved and saying, "Okay, yeah, this will be over by the summer." Others were like, "You should cancel." So there's a wider range of emotions and feelings and thoughts going around the furry community in regards to coronavirus and its effect on conventions.
Yeah. So we just wanted to get your opinion, Kaz. What how do you think, with two vaccines already out, three more on the way, and and conventions slowly but cautiously opening back up to getting back to normal, what say you? How how late do you think will be, or how early do you think will be back to normal?
Oh man, it's all going to come down to like speculation at this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we know that for the vaccine phases, number one, like phase one, is definitely like the frontline workers, people like me who are working in ICUs with COVID patients.
Mhm.
I think estimates for the general public start like maybe late spring or the summer, and then of course onwards after that. So I guess the good thing with AC is that it's in July. It's typically a time where infectious diseases are down because people are more spread out. It's summertime. People are outside uh, doing things outside, and it's not wintertime where people are kind of huddled together more. So um, I know there was like a little uptake with COVID last year, but it's kind of a time where restrictions were coming out, and a lot of people were getting once again politically charged at
Mm.
events going on in our country. It's a great
Yeah.
country of ours. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very cautiously optimistic about AC.
Okay.
I mean, if it is open, of course, Pennsylvania as a state will have to have some kind of release of restrictions. Pittsburgh will have to approve it, and then the convention center itself will have to have their own restrictions. And then it comes down to the more like micro level of AC itself. And then, yeah, if it's the first convention in the COVID world, probably definitely have to like mandate masks on that. But then also, how do you enforce that?
So
That's a good question.
yeah, you could so, and I've talked to Lifty about this numerous times when we've covered coronavirus and conventions and how they would move forward in 2021. And my whole thing was, if this were to happen, if cons were to come back at the tail end of a pandemic, they should, if they're going to come back, they should institute mask wearing in convention spaces and some form of social distancing if possible. Outside of con space, that's would be up to the hotel, and I don't know how you enforce that in rooms. I don't know how you enforce that in room parties
The only thing
or
you can do it for room parties. The only thing I
yeah,
can think of is the convention center itself, like having staff members at entrances requiring mask upon entrance. And then, of course, there's staff throughout the center itself. And if people see you without a mask, then maybe they'll revoke your badge or something. But
and then are we like checking temperatures as well to see who's coming in and who's, it would be very costly to the convention
oh yeah,
itself
that
because
that
they'd
requires
have
like a
to,
lot of manpower and resources and time to
yeah.
take everyone's
Yeah.
temperature.
Yes. Yeah. So this has been a very enlightening talk, and I'm very glad that we were able to sit down and have it. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast, Kaz. It's been a great guest, and hopefully everybody can be able to take what we've said on this podcast and learn a little bit about it. We will be posting some of our links to our research and all of our data onto our podcast Twitter at Furry Frequencies. So if you're not following us on Twitter, please feel free to do so, especially if you like what you hear. It's at Furry Frequency. And do you want to share some last minute thoughts, or you want to shill yourself? Go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah, I'll give us a few last minute thoughts.
Yeah.
I know there's been a lot of skepticism on COVID-19 throughout the year and all the political environment of the country. But the things I can tell you is that hospitals are overloaded at the moment. Whether you believe COVID-19 is real or not, hospitals are overwhelmed with a very specific respiratory disease that is going on. That's been very difficult to treat. There's only been like one kind of medication out there that's proven some kind of effect on patients. And it's like steroids. Not really much of anything else has really helped as of yet. And at least if they have, they're in like very small studies. So we're still in this kind of phase where we don't have much to address this virus. So whether you think it's real or not, but yeah, all I can say is just be safe, keep your distance from people. I'm not saying like to stay in your room all day long and never live your life until 2022, but just be mindful of yourself, be mindful of your others, keep yourself and others safe. And yeah,
All
I
right.
think that's all I've got.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And if people wanted to reach out to you on the internet, what's the best way to do that?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Kaz and Quincy. It's one word, Kaz and Quincy, and I guess I do Instagram now, kind of. For some
Oh,
reason, I don't post much on Instagram, and then people keep following me. So I guess that's the thing to do.
It's the magic of Instagram. People love your pictures, so they'll keep following you.
It's like since November, like follower count is just like I don't know, like over doubled, and like I've posted 3 things since then. I don't know, but anyway, Twitter and Telegram are both. I guess not Telegram. Twitter and Instagram are both Kaz and Quincy. I think Twitter or Telegram is Kaz and Quincy too, but I don't know. I'm very quiet because I've been working like nonstop. So this is
Oh,
like my
bless
first
you
of
for your
3
work,
off.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
my bank account is happy. My brain is not happy. So
Oh no. Well, I mean, hopefully you're able to relax a little bit before you head back to work. And also, thank you for joining us on this podcast. And this has been Furry Frequencies signing off with Lifty.
And Psylocke.
If you like what you hear, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to this YouTube channel if you're hearing us on YouTube, which more or less you probably will be because we're not doing Twitch anymore. So yeah, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to our videos. And we will be uploading new podcasts every week. And we hope to also be catching you on Twitter as well at Furry Frequency. If you want to go ahead and follow us on Twitch as well, that is also open. But we're not going to have Twitch streams for a while. And that's, of course, twitch.tv/Furry Frequencies. And anyway, thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of Furry Frequencies. And we hope you have a great and healthy night.
Good night, Fairfax.
Good night, Arlington.
Good night, Herndon.
Craig, cut it off. Cut it off.
get him,
Herndon,
Craig.
Virginia is a town in Fairfax County. Virginia,
No.
with
This
its
is
own-
fake news. This is fake news. No. Stop.
Ugh.
Fake news.
All right.
Craig, cut it off.